Welcome to ibbusinessandmanagement.com. I'm Mr. Burton, site author of ibbusinessandmanagement.com and head of commerce at a leading independent IB World School. Now today we'll be looking at the topic 2.5 motivation and the human resource management unit of the IB Diploma Business and Management course. I hope you learned something today. Sit back, take it in, take some notes. Motivation 2.5. Motivation, often discussed, but what is it?
I need to make a confession at the outset here. A little over 20 years ago, I did something that I regret, something that I'm not particularly proud of, something that in many ways I wish no one would ever know, but that here I feel kind of obliged to reveal. In the late 1980s, in a moment of youthful indiscretion, I went to law school. Now, in America, law is a professional degree. You get your university degree, then you go on to law school. And when I got to law school, I didn't do very well. To put it mildly, I didn't do very well. I, in fact, graduated in the part of my law school class that made the top 90% possible. Thank you. I never practiced law a day in my life. I pretty much wasn't allowed to. But today, against my better judgment, against the advice of my own wife, I want to try to dust off some of those legal skills, what's left of those legal skills. I don't want to tell you a story. I want to make a case. I want to make a hard-headed, evidence-based, dare I say lawyerly case for rethinking how we run our businesses. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, take a look at this. This is called the candle problem. Some of you might have seen this before. It's created in 1945 by a psychologist named Carl Duncker. Carl Duncker created this experiment that's used in a whole variety of experiments in behavioral science. And here's how it works. Suppose I'm the experimenter. I bring you into a room. I give you a candle, some thumbtacks, and some matches. And I say to you, your job is to attach the candle to the wall so the wax doesn't drip onto the table. Now, what would you do? Many people begin trying to thumbtack the candle to the wall. Doesn't work. Some people, and I saw somebody kind of make the motion over here, some people have a great idea where they light the match, melt the side of the candle, try to adhere it to the wall. It's an awesome idea, doesn't work. And eventually, after 5 or 10 minutes, most people figure out the solution, which you can see here. The key is to overcome what's called functional fixedness. You look at that box and you see it only as a receptacle for the tacks, but it can also have this other function as a platform for the candle. The candle problem. Now, I want to tell you about an experiment using the candle problem done by a scientist named Sam Glucksberg, who's now at Princeton University in the US. This shows the power of incentives. Here's what he did. He gathered his participants and he said, I'm going to time you how quickly you can solve this problem. To one group, he said, I'm going to time you to establish norms, averages, for how long it typically takes someone to solve this sort of problem. To the second group, he offered rewards. He said, if you're in the top 25% of the fastest times, you get $5. If you're the fastest of everyone we're testing here today, you get $20. Okay, now this is several years ago, adjusted for inflation. It's a decent sum of money for a few minutes of work. Okay, it's a nice motivator. Question, how much faster did this group solve the problem? Answer, it took them on average 3.5 minutes longer. 3.5 minutes longer. Now this makes no sense, right? I mean, I'm an American, I believe in free markets, that's not how it's supposed to work, right? If you want people to perform better, you reward them, right? Bonuses, commissions, their own reality show, incentivize them. That's how business works, but that's not happening here. You've got an incentive designed to sharpen thinking and accelerate creativity, and it does just the opposite. It dulls thinking and blocks creativity. And what's interesting about this experiment is that it's not an aberration. This has been replicated over and over and over again for nearly 40 years. These contingent motivators. If you do this, then you get that, work in some circumstances, but for a lot of tasks, they actually either don't work or often they do harm. This is one of the most robust findings in social science and also one of the most ignored. I've spent the last couple of years looking at the science of human motivation, particularly the dynamics of extrinsic motivators and intrinsic motivators. And I'm telling you, it's not even close. If you look at the science, there is a mismatch between what science knows and what business does. And what's alarming here is that our business operating system, think of the set of assumptions and protocols beneath our businesses, how we motivate people, how we apply our human resources. It's built entirely around these extrinsic motivators, around carrots and sticks. That's actually fine for many kinds of 20th century tasks. But for 21st century tasks, that mechanistic reward and punishment approach doesn't work, often doesn't work, and often does harm. Let me show you what I mean. So Glucksberg did another experiment similar to this, where he presented the problem in a slightly different way, like this up here. Okay? Attach the candle to the wall so the wax doesn't drip onto the table. Same deal. You were timing for norms. You were incentivizing. What happened this time? This time, the incentivized group kicked the other group's butt. Why? Because when the tacks are out of the box, it's pretty easy, isn't it? If-then rewards work really well for those sorts of tasks, where there's a simple set of rules and a clear destination to go to. Rewards, by their very nature, narrow our focus, concentrate the mind. That's why they work in so many cases. And so for tasks like this, a narrowed focus where you just see the goal right there, zoom straight ahead to it, they work really well. But for the real candle problem, you don't want to be looking like this. The solution's not over here. The solution's on the periphery. You want to be looking around. That reward actually narrows our focus and restricts our possibility. Let me tell you why this is so important. In Western Europe, in many parts of Asia, in North America, in Australia, white-collar workers are doing less of this kind of work and more of this kind of work. That routine, rule-based, left-brain work, certain kinds of accounting, certain kinds of financial analysis, certain kinds of computer programming has become fairly easy to outsource, fairly easy to automate. Software can do it faster. Low-cost providers around the world can do it cheaper. So what really matters are the more right-brain, creative, conceptual kinds of abilities. Think about your own work. Think about your own work. Are the problems that you face, or even the problems we've been talking about here, are those kinds of problems where they have a clear set of rules and a single solution? No. The rules are mystifying. The solution, if it exists at all, is surprising and non-obvious. Everybody in this room is dealing with their own version of the candle problem. And for candle problems of any kind, in any field, those if-then rewards, the things around which we've built so many of our businesses, don't work. Now, I mean, it makes me crazy. And this is not, here's the thing, this is not a feeling, okay? I'm a lawyer, I don't believe in feelings. This is not a philosophy. I'm an American, I don't believe in philosophy. This is a fact, or as we say in my hometown of Washington, D.C., a true fact. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Let me marshal the evidence here, because I'm not telling you a story, I'm making a case, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Some evidence. Dan Ariely, one of the great economists of our time. He and 3 colleagues did a study with some MIT students. They gave these MIT students a bunch of games that involved creativity and motor skills and concentration. And they offered them for performance 3 levels of rewards. Small reward, medium reward, large reward. Okay? Do really well, you get the large reward, on down. What happened? As long as the task involved only mechanical skill, bonuses worked as they would be expected. The higher the pay, the better the performance. Okay? But once the task called for even rudimentary cognitive skill, a larger reward led to poorer performance. Then they said, okay, let's see if there's any cultural bias here. Let's go to Madurai, India and test this. Reward standard of living is lower. In Madurai, a reward that's modest by North American standards is more meaningful there. Same deal. A bunch of games, 3 levels of rewards. What happens? People offered the medium level of rewards, did no better than people offered the small rewards. But this time, people offered the highest rewards. They did worst of all. In 8 of the 9 tasks we examined across 3 experiments, higher incentives led to worse performance. Is this some kind of touchy-feely socialist conspiracy going on here? No, these are economists from MIT, from Carnegie Mellon, from the University of Chicago. And do you know who sponsored this research? The Federal Reserve Bank of the United States. That's the American experience. Let's go across the pond to the London School of Economics. LSE, London School of Economics, alma mater of 11 Nobel laureates in economics. Training ground for great economic thinkers like George Soros and Friedrich Hayek and Mick Jagger. Just last month, economists at LSE looked at 51 studies of pay-for-performance plans inside of companies. Here's what the economists there said. We find that financial incentives can result in a negative impact on overall performance. There's a mismatch between what science knows and what business does. And what worries me as we stand here in the rubble of the economic collapse is that too many organizations are making their decisions, their policies about talent and people, based on assumptions that are outdated, unexamined, and rooted more in folklore than in science. And if we really want to get out of this economic mess, and if we really want high performance on those definitional tasks of the 21st century, the solution is not to do more of the wrong things, to entice people with a sweeter carrot or threaten them with a sharper stick. We need a whole new approach. The good news about all this is that the scientists who've been studying motivation have given us this new approach. It's an approach built much more around intrinsic motivation, around the desire to do things because they matter, because we like it, because they're interesting, because they're part of something important. And to my mind, that new operating system for our businesses revolves around 3 elements: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy, the urge to direct our own lives. Mastery, the desire to get better and better at something that matters. And purpose, the yearning to do what we do in the service of something larger than ourselves. These are the building blocks of an entirely new operating system for our businesses. I want to talk today only about autonomy. In 20th century, we came up with this idea of management. Management did not emanate from nature. Okay? Management is it's not a tree, it's a television set. Okay? Somebody invented it. And it doesn't mean it's going to work forever. Management is great. Traditional notions of management are great if you want compliance. But if you want engagement, self-direction works better. Let me give you some examples of some kind of radical notions of self-direction. And what this means, you don't see a lot of it, but you see the first stirrings of something really interesting going on. Because what it means is, it means paying people adequately and fairly, absolutely. Getting the issue of money off the table, and then giving people lots of autonomy. Let me give you some examples. How many of you have heard of the company Atlassian? Okay, looks like less than half. Atlassian is an Australian software company, and they do something incredibly cool. A few times a year, they tell their engineers, go for the next 24 hours and work on anything you want. as long as it's not part of your regular job. Work on anything you want. So the engineers use this time to come up with a cool patch of code, to come up with an elegant hack. Then they present all of these stuff that they've developed to their teammates, to the rest of the company, in this wild and woolly all-hands meeting at the end of the day. And then, being Australians, everybody has a beer. They call them FedEx days. Why? Because you have to deliver something overnight. It's not bad. It's a huge trademark violation, but it's pretty clever. That one day of intense autonomy has produced a whole array of software fixes that might never have existed. And it's worked so well that Atlassian has taken it to the next level with 20% time, done famously at Google, where engineers can spend 20% of their time working on anything they want. They have autonomy over their time, their task, their team, their technique. Okay? Radical amounts of autonomy. And at Google, as many of you know, about half of the new products in a typical year are birthed during that 20% time. Things like Gmail, Orchid, Google News. Let me give you an even more radical example of it. Something called the results-only work environment, the ROW, created by 2 American consultants in place at about a dozen companies around North America. In a ROW, people don't have schedules. They show up when they want. They don't have to be in the office at a certain time or any time. They just have to get their work done. How they do it, when they do it, where they do it, is totally up to them. Meetings in these kinds of environments are optional. What happens? Almost across the board. Productivity goes up, worker engagement goes up, worker satisfaction goes up, turnover goes down. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose. These are the building blocks of a new way of doing things. Now, some of you might look at this and say, that sounds nice, but it's utopian. And I say, nope. I have proof. In the mid-1990s, Microsoft started an encyclopedia called Encarta. They had deployed all the right incentives. All the right incentives. They paid professionals to write and edit thousands of articles. Well-compensated managers oversaw the whole thing to make sure it came in on budget and on time. A few years later, another encyclopedia got started. Different model, right? Do it for fun. No one gets paid a cent or a euro or a yen. Do it because you like to do it. Now, if you had, just 10 years ago, if you had gone to an economist anywhere and said, hey, I got these 2 different models for creating an encyclopedia, if they went head-to-head, who would win? 10 years ago, you could not have found a single sober economist anywhere on planet Earth who would have predicted the Wikipedia model. This is the titanic battle between these 2 approaches. This is the Ali Frazier of motivation, right? This is the Thriller in Manila, all right? Intrinsic motivators versus extrinsic motivators. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose versus carrots and sticks. And who wins? Intrinsic motivation, autonomy, mastery, and purpose in a knockout. Let me wrap up. There's a mismatch between what science knows and what business does, and here's what science knows. 1, those 20th century rewards, those motivators we think are the natural part of business, do work, but only in a surprisingly narrow band of circumstances. 2, those if-then rewards often destroy creativity. 3, the secret to high performance isn't rewards and punishments, but that unseen intrinsic drive, the drive to do things for their own sake, the drive to do things because they matter. And here's the best part. Here's the best part. We already know this. The science confirms what we know in our hearts. So, if we repair this mismatch between what science knows and what business does, if we bring our motivation, notions of motivation into the 21st century, if we get past this lazy, dangerous ideology of carrots and sticks, we can strengthen our businesses, we can solve a lot of those candle problems, and maybe, we can change the world. I rest my case.
A great little introduction to motivation there. So just repeating, motivation, the desire to do something. We need to make a distinction between intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic comes from within, Extrinsic comes from the environment. So intrinsic motivation, the rewards come from engaging in the task. For example, the satisfaction of mastering a task. We saw that in the TED video. Mastery is intrinsic. Extrinsic motivation, the rewards come from the benefits and the rewards from outside the task. For example, the salary being paid, that bonus, the praise from your superiors for a job well done. So intrinsic comes from engaging in the task, mastery, purpose, perhaps autonomy. And extrinsic motivation, the benefits and rewards from outside the task. Money is classic.
Woohoo!
Lots of benefits of increased motivation and definite warning signs of poor motivation. A first benefit of increased motivation, higher morale and job satisfaction, and with this comes improved productivity and quality of work. Warning sign of poor motivation, high absenteeism, people phoning in sick, people taking time off work for other things, people not showing up.
Woohoo! Aw, crap.
Right, increased motivation improves the corporate image, and with improved corporate image we are better able to attract customers and quality staff. So that's quite a virtuous circle. If we can increase the motivation of our staff within our organisations, this can benefit customers, and it in turn feeds into more quality staff, more motivated staff, more intrinsically motivated staff being employed. On the other side, another warning sign of poor motivation, high labour turnover rate. So lots of your employees leaving each and every year.
Woohoo! Aw, crap.
We get better industrial relations, less conflict, less disruption in the workplace with increased motivation. Another high wastage levels would be another warning sign of poor motivation. So lots of stuff on the production line being rejected because it's not up to scratch.
Woohoo! Aw, crap.
And the other side of these two coins, increased motivation, we get lower staff turnover. And we know that there's a definite cost to hiring and training new staff. So the lower the staff turnover, the less you're hiring and training staff. And the more experienced and able your staff tend to be, the longer they stay. A low quality output would be a definite warning sign of poor motivation.
Woohoo! Aw, crap.
Low absenteeism, higher productivity, warning signs of poor motivation, increasing number of customer complaints would be something to look out for.
Woohoo! Aw, crap.
And in the end, you've got a highly motivated workforce. Your company is going to be nailing it. They're going to be creaming it. Higher profits. Your staff are what makes your company. And warning signs of poor motivation, increased number of disciplinary problems. So motivation, we can see, is incredibly important. Lots of factors feeding into motivation will lead ultimately to the profitability of your company. And poorly motivated staff feeding directly into increased costs. Love that little video, and this typifies exactly what we saw in that TED talk. Money motivates and improves performance when the tasks, the job requirements don't involve that conceptual thought. Right. We'll look at several motivation theorists now, and the first is Taylor. He came up with the principles of scientific management, and essentially it was looking at exactly this. For Taylor, money was the primary motivator. Specialized labor, differentiated piecework, so people doing small parts of a job, just like we saw in that Chinese factory there. Division of labor and specialization leads to productivity gains as skills are mastered to a high degree, and this comes about through differentiated piecework. You're basically being paid for what you produce. Maslow essentially said that businesses should be offering incentives to workers so they can fulfill needs in a sequence. And he came up with the hierarchy of needs. Down at the bottom, physiological needs need to be satisfied. Security needs build on top of that. Once people are secure, then they can satisfy their social needs. Once their social needs are in place, then they can work on their esteem. And right at the top, self-actualization. Let's have a look at each of these in turn. Now for Maslow, money was only one motivator. Money was only one motivator, and that typically comes under security needs. Have enough money, food on the table, provide for our families. But before we get even here, physiological needs first need that we need to be able to satisfy. Survival needs, food, sleep, shelter, etc. Food on the table, pay the mortgage, money being very important. Security needs, predictability, daily routine, daily structure, job security, sick pay, maternity leave and retirement income. These are all needs that need to be fulfilled. Social needs, love and belonging, being accepted as part of a group, family and friends. And we can do that at work through fostering a sense of teamwork and a sense of belonging with the organisation. Esteem needs, getting to the top of the pyramid now, self-respect and a sense of achievement. You want to go into your job, you want to have that sense of achievement at the end of the day. Status in the workplace and being amongst similar others. Promotion of internal staff and training and development opportunities will help with these sense of achievement, sense of fulfillment, self-respect being achieved. And letting workers, letting subordinates have input into decision-making processes feeds into these esteem needs. And right up the top of the pyramid we have self-actualization. And that's the drive to be the best one can be. It's all about personal development and promotion. The freedom for people to exploit their talents in the job they excel and in which only they know the best. The drive to be the best one can be. Hertzberg, a very, very important motivational theorist as well. His main focus was on the causes of dissatisfaction at work. Hygiene factors are crucial here. Hygiene factors those aspects of work that don't motivate people but must be met to prevent dissatisfaction. So they're not motivating people, they're there, and they're there just to prevent dissatisfaction. Rules, regulations, employment conditions, pay, etc. They don't motivate people, but if they're sufficient, then they prevent dissatisfaction. Pay rises are not going to motivate. Pay rises come every year, they're expected. But it's important to avoid dissatisfaction that the pay of the people in the organisation should not be below industry averages. The pay at my school should not be below that of other similar schools. If it is, I'm going to become dissatisfied and unmotivated in my work. So hygiene factors, we're looking at removing dissatisfaction. Now motivators, on the other hand, lead to psychological growth of workers and increased satisfaction and performance. So here we're heading into the motivation. With motivation we get job enlargement, one of the primary motivators at work. And job enlargement is all about giving people variety in the tasks that they do. So for example, perhaps you're working in a supermarket, you can both man and do man the cashier, the counters, and serve people, and you're on the shop floor helping other people. Another key motivator, job enrichment, increasing the complexity and the challenge of a task. Once people can master something new, that's a great source of motivation, great source of reward. Being able to master complex and challenging tasks. The more you can master it, the more you've got that sense of purpose, the more likely you are to enjoy and throw yourself into your work. And job empowerment, giving people power over how they do a task. So it's delegation of decision making down to those employees that you trust. Job enlargement, job enrichment, job empowerment, the 3 JEs, quite easy to remember. And again, I repeat, Hertzberg, very easy to discuss, motivational theorist. A very good one to know and learn. Hygiene factors plus motivators, the key here. And we have a key distinction between movement and motivation. Movement, the person does the task because she needs to. This is extrinsic. She does the task because this is what's expected, this is what she's getting paid for. Motivation, person does the task because she wants to. It's intrinsic. Completing the task, getting satisfaction from that. Alright, we've got up the top here, stakeholders dissatisfied and unmotivated. If we get our hygiene factors right, then stakeholders are not dissatisfied anymore, but there's no motivation to make improvement. If we can get those motivation factors in there, then we get our employees, our stakeholders being satisfied and being motivated. So motivation factors, they're not going to work unless the hygiene factors are right. But hygiene factors in themselves are not enough to motivate people to want to do things.
In football, it is common for a coach or a player to pat you on the bottom for a job well done. But what do you do if you want to let somebody know that they have done a really good job?
What are you doing?
Nice work with that new client.
That was huge! Michael, I reorganized my files.
Don't be a suck-up. Did a great job with that fax.
I didn't. I forgot to put a cover sheet and I misspelled 2 words.
But you got it there on time.
I sent it to the wrong number.
Okay. All right.
Since Michael started doing this, we're all terrified of doing even an adequate job.
Hey, Cal. You did a great job on the spreadsheet.
No,
Yes, you did.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did. You're being modest.
No, I'm not.
Our productivity has dropped 40%. I think Michael may have actually started the recession.
0.
Okay.
What are you doing? You are a great boss.
Ow! Oh, thanks. Oh, God.
Nice work.
Probably not how to motivate people. The first in the content theories, Mayo, a high-level topic, what motivates people? Very interesting set of experiments here, the Hawthorne factory experiments. I'll briefly tell you about those now. A fascinating experiment, fascinating study, where previously it was all down, the motivation was money. But here, these set of experiments showed that non-financial factors could be much more of a motivation than financial methods. Mayo, his series of experiments were done at the Hawthorne factory of Western Electric Company in Chicago, USA. His work was initially based on the assumption that working conditions, things that like lighting, heating, rest periods, etc., had a significant effect on workers' productivity. Now, the experiments were undertaken to establish the optimum working conditions. As in all good scientific practice, the output of a control group was also recorded, and this group experienced no changes in working conditions at all. And the results really surprised the observers. As lighting and other conditions were changed, both improved and worsened, so productivity rose in all groups, including the control group. As the lights were turned down, productivity started going up. Super bright lights, productivity was rising as well. Working conditions in themselves were not the important in determining productivity levels. Other motivational factors needed to be investigated further before conclusions could be drawn. And subsequent experiments were carried out with a group of assembly line workers. Changes to rest periods, payment systems, assembly bench layout and canteen food were made at 12-week intervals. And crucially, before every major change, the researchers discussed the new changes with the work group, and at the end of the experiments, the working conditions and hours of work were returned to how they had been before the start of the trial. Output rose far above the original level. Clearly, other motivational factors were operating to increase productivity, completely separate from conditions at work. And essentially, when management and other people take interest in workers' tasks and activities, then their motivation is improved. And the conclusion of Mayo was that productivity increased with teamwork, scope for discretion, that's having some input into the way the task is carried out, and the feeling that your views and efforts are being recognized. Team spirit, group dynamics, all very important. McClellan, second in the content theory about what motivates people. In power, people with different needs, and each need needs to be motivated differently. Gosh, a few needs thrown in there. People have different needs, and each need needs to be motivated differently. That makes sense. Right, 3 N's. We have a need for achievement, need for affiliation, and a need for power. The achievement motivation. A person with a strong motivation or need for achievement is going to seek to reach realistic and challenging goals and job advancement. Now, there is a constant need for feedback regarding progress and achievement, and a need for a sense of accomplishment. Research has suggested that this result-driven attitude is almost always a common characteristic of a successful business people and entrepreneurs. A need for power or authority power motivation. A person with this dominant need is authority motivated. The desire to control others is a powerful motivating force. The need to be influential, effective, and to make an impact. There is a strong leadership instinct, and when authority is gained from over others, it brings personal status and prestige. So that's the need for power as a motivator. The third factor that McLellan identified is the affiliation motivation. And this could you can see a lot of overlap here. Affiliation motivation, we saw this with Maslow and his social needs. Here with the affiliation motivation, the person with the need for affiliation is the strongest driver or motivator, has a need for friendly relationships, and is motivated towards interaction with other people. These people tend to be good team members. There is a need to be liked and popular and to be held in high regard. Process theories. These emphasize how and why people choose certain behaviors in order to meet their personal goals and the thought processes that influence behavior. Now, how to motivate people. Vroom and his expectancy theory. There is a positive link between effort and performance, and favourable performance is going to result in a desirable reward. The reward will satisfy an important need, and the desire to satisfy the need is strong enough to make the work effort worthwhile. And his expectancy theory is based on the following three beliefs. Expectancy, the degree to which people believe that putting effort into work will lead to a given level of performance. Instrumentality, the confidence of employees that they will actually get what they desire regardless of what has been promised by the manager. And valence, the depth of the want of an employee for an extrinsic reward such as money or an intrinsic reward such as satisfaction. So the employee needs to value the reward. And even if just one of these conditions or beliefs is missing, then workers are not going to have the motivation to do the job well. So according to Vroom, managers should try to ensure that employees believe that increased work effort will improve performance, and this performance will lead to valued rewards. Financial motivation. How important is it? Quite a variety of different financial payment systems, and each in turn has possible effects on motivation. And I say possible effects on staff motivation because, as we've seen previously, money is not necessarily a primary motivator. It's one of those hygiene needs, perhaps. Money lessens the dissatisfaction with a job but may not be a primary motivator. But let's have a look at financial motivation. Wages, type of financial payment system based on time. It's a variable cost to a business. The more time people put in, the more the costs of the business are going to rise. And it's typically usually an hourly rate for labour. So you get paid by the hour. Overtime payments are often paid for hours in excess of contracted hours. So if you're contracted in for 40 hours in a week and you work 45, then you get an overtime payment in compensation. Wages are easy to understand But on the downside, it's time, not effort, that's being rewarded. Putting in the time is what's resulting in your increased payments. Piece rate, these pay workers for each item they produce or sell in a given time period. And the more you produce, the more you earn. So there's an incentive to work hard and maximize your outcomes. It does, however, lead to uncertainty in income levels, and quality may suffer as workers frantically try and pump out as much of their product or complete as many tasks as possible. Salaries, again, this is time-based payment, but this time it's a fixed cost to the business, and it's used where output or productivity isn't easy to measure, and where linking pay with speed may lead to lower standards. It's really easy to understand, but again, it's difficult to reward productivity. Commission is all based on output, an output-based payment system. So it must be a variable cost to business. Workers are paid a percentage of the sales or output contributed. Efficiency and effort's being rewarded, but the pressure on workers and quality could well suffer. So real estate agents are a classic example of commission-based employees. Lots of pressure to sell a house, beat that other person into selling it before you, and quality often suffers as you frantically try to increase output. Profit related pay, typically here your bonuses come in, and often the size of the bonus is dependent on how profitable that firm was that year. The advantage is it could strengthen employee loyalty and foster a sense of teamwork, but on the other side, the share given to ordinary workers often is quite insufficient to motivate. So if you have a look at banks, it says people at the top that get these huge 100, 200, 900,000 pound bonuses at the end of the year. The little bank clerk gets almost nothing in terms of bonuses. Performance related pay, again this is usually paid as an annual bonus, and the size of the bonus is dependent on how well targets have been met. This creates incentives to work and perform better, but it may not promote teamwork and may encourage individual risk taking, and again we've got to think bankers here. Share ownership schemes. These are often paid to what we term the elite, chief executive officers, board of directors, and it's often paid as an alternative to profit sharing or cash bonuses. Now, the good thing about it is, in addition to normal incentives, staff become vested stakeholders with a long-term interest in the performance of the company. Share ownership schemes, long-term interest in the performance of those shares. Again, it typically doesn't reward the ordinary worker, and conditions on when shares can be sold may be needed. So your CEOs, board of directors, they may have to keep their shares. They won't be able to sell them for 3, 4, 5, 10 years. And fringe benefits, these are payments and benefits to employees in addition to wages and salaries. It helps encourage loyalty and meets safety needs. For example, healthcare costs in the US, many businesses pay health insurance for their workers. It's typically how most people, in fact, get themselves enrolled in health insurance schemes. But just because it's paid on the side, it doesn't mean that it doesn't come without a cost. It can come as a huge cost for a company. Healthcare insurance and deductibles in the US something like 10,000 per year per worker. And when you think that Google has 31,000 workers, it's a heck of a lot of money. A huge cost. Right, financial motivation. Let's move to non-financial motivation here. And there are a few key characteristics of non-financial motivation. Non-financial motivation comes from job enrichment, job enlargement, empowerment, and team working. And we have looked at some of these when we examined different motivational theorists previously. Job enrichment, very important. So this involves the principle of organising work so that employees are encouraged and allowed to use their full abilities, not just physical effort. The process often involves a slackening of direct supervision as workers take more responsibility for their own work and are allowed some degree of decision-making authority. Herzberg's findings form the basis of the job enrichment principle. Remember, we touched on that when we looked at Herzberg. The three key features of it are not always easy to apply in practice, but employers are increasingly recognizing the benefits to be gained by attempting to implement them. So complete units of work so that the contribution of the worker can be identified and more challenging work offered. Direct feedback on performance to allow each worker to have an awareness of their own progress. And challenging tasks offered as part of a range of activities, some of which are beyond the worker's recent experience. Now these tasks will require training and the learning of new skills. And gaining further skills and qualifications is a form of gaining status and recognition, and we can relate that back to Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. Job enlargement. This can include both job rotation and job enrichment, but it also refers to increasing the loading of tasks on existing workers, perhaps as a result of shortage of staff or redundancies, and that is unlikely to lead to long-term job satisfaction unless the principles of job enrichment are adopted. Empowerment, giving workers some authority, some responsibility as to how they are going to carry out their task. Very rewarding, this one. And team working. This approach to work places each member of staff into a small team of employees. Some traditionalists argue that moving away from pure division of labour, where one worker performs just one simple task all of the time, is going to result in lower productivity and time-wasting team meetings. Supporters of job enrichment are going to respond by claiming that more challenging and interesting work, as allowed by team working, is going to lead to lower labour turnover, more and better ideas from the workforce on improving the product and the manufacturing process, and consistently higher quality. Right. A number of benefits to the organisation for team working, and this should outweigh that pure division of a labour productivity gains. Benefits of the organisation from team working. Team spirit should improve the motivation of staff. Teams are more flexible than hierarchical systems. New teams can be formed and redundant teams disbanded as the needs of the organisation change. And management costs may well be reduced as fewer middle managers and supervisory staff are required. And we come down to different roles for different teams and different team members. Right. Get the team, the task, and the individual. If we can match those up, very motivating. Different roles members can play within a team. We've got the doers. We've got the thinkers. And we've got those inherently social relationship builders. Right, we've come to the end of our 2.5 motivation section in this human resource management section. Hope you learned something today. As always, it's been a pleasure for me to be here running you through the IB Business and Management course. It's what I do, it's what I'm paid for, but I'm certainly not, there's no financial motivation here. Intrinsically motivating this kind of stuff. I'm Mr. Burden. It's been a pleasure to have you with me today. Look forward to meeting with you next time when we run through organizational and corporate cultures. That's an interesting topic. I'll see you then.